If you've ever wondered why rhythm changes is mentioned so often when learning jazz and why it is required study for every player, in this video I will answer those questions and many more. Hi, I'm Richie Zellen and I want to welcome you back to the Jazz Guitar channel. And if this is your first time here and you want to learn everything you can about playing jazz guitar, please consider subscribing and be sure to click on the bell icon so you won't miss a thing. I recently posted a video entitled The Bird Blues Diet, in which I explained how mastering the changes to a 12-measure progression by Charlie Parker would prepare you to solo over most jazz standards. In that video, I mentioned that in a future date, I would do the same with rhythm changes. So, with this video, I am fulfilling my promise. Now, if you missed the Bird Blues lesson, I strongly advise that you watch it, as it is the ideal complement to everything I am going to talk about here. I am going to start out by explaining what rhythm changes is and then play over the progression for those that may not be familiar with it. Then I will break it down and explain why it is considered required study for every jazz player. So let's start by defining what musicians refer to when they mention rhythm changes. In brief, rhythm changes refers to any tune that is based on the chord changes to I Got Rhythm, which George and Ira Gershwin wrote back in the 1930s. And it so happens that by the time bebop was born during the 1940s, jazz musicians had already adopted this chord progression as their choice harmonic vehicle for exploring new improvisational ideas. But before I get into the theory of why it became the choice progression for bebop players, let me improvise over a chorus of rhythm changes so that those of you not familiar with the sound of it can easier relate to what I will point out afterwards. Here goes. Don't know how many bits and pieces of different chord progressions your ears were able to identify from the overall harmony. But the bottom line why bebop players made it their choice progression is because it reunites within one piece the essential cadences and chord types one had to master in order to improvise over most major key standards of that period. And since a great number of those standards are still played today, rhythm changes is still the seminal chord progression any serious student of improvisation must spend quality time with in order to develop his or her bebop chops. So having said that, let's break it down and better understand what harmonic cadences this progression is comprised of. Okay, I sense some of you wondering what I mean by harmonic cadences. It's simple. When we analyze a chord progression in jazz, we don't do it in terms of individual isolated chords, but instead of groups of chords. And these chunks or groups of usually 2 to 4 chords are referred to as harmonic cadences, and they are responsible for helping establish the tonality. Now, I'm sure you've heard of 2-5-1s or 1-4-5 progressions. These are harmonic cadences and they reappear over and over again, sometimes disguised within different tunes. Therefore, if we take the time to master them in different keys and tempos, when we encounter them again in a new standard, they will appear as familiar, frequently traveled roads. This alone will greatly shorten the time it takes us to learn a new tune. So having said that, what are the harmonic cadences we encounter in rhythm changes? Number one, the most popular one is the 1-6-2-5 major cadence. And there are literally innumerable songs written over this progression, even outside of jazz. Let me demonstrate. So rhythm changes is traditionally played in B flat. This is the 1-6-2-5 cadence in major. And let me play it using the root on the 6th and 5th strings so you can visualize it easier. And I'm sure you've heard this progression many times. You can recall many tunes from the 50s that were written over it. For example, you remember hearing stuff like this. And of course, it is customary these days, at least, to substitute the 6 minor chord for a dominant, usually an altered dominant. And there's all sorts of substitutions, like with different tritones. It also is used as a turnaround, usually by substituting the 1 chord for the 3 minor 7 chord. Of course, there's many other substitutions for that. The second common cadence we find is the 1 major 7 to 4 major 7 in the 5th and 6th measures. Let me demonstrate. The bebop players reharmonized the 1 chord with a dominant and appended its related 2 minor 7th chord to create additional movement with a 2-5-7 cadence resolving to the 4 chord. So, then to create even more motion, the second half of this chord was reharmonized with the flat 7 dominant. So it sounds like this. The third and final important progression rhythm changes introduces consists of the bridge. Here we have a string of dominant chords which starts on the major 3rd of the key and progresses through the cycle of descending 5ths until arriving back at the 1 chord. And this is a valuable progression to master simply because most Western music is based on this cycle. In addition, there are several standards that borrow this progression just for the bridge. For example, Scrapple from the Apple by Charlie Parker has a rhythm changes bridge. Let me demonstrate. The bebop players altered the dominance and added a 2-5, more like. and so forth. And of course, there's all sorts of different substitutions for that. A final resource I'd like to mention related to the study of rhythm changes is the use of contrafacts. A contrafact is the practice of writing a new melody over an existing chord progression. And of course, this trend was probably started by Charlie Parker, who wrote Anthropology, Moose the Mooch, Celerity, Kim, and many other rhythm changes contrafacts. Musicians write contrafacts for a variety of reasons. Sometimes as an etude to practice their improvisational ideas, and other times simply to change the original melody and avoid having to pay copyright fees when recording the tune. And that is possible because by law you cannot copyright a chord progression. So you might not realize it, but hundreds of jazz tunes you listen to are actually contrafacts of different well-known standards. As a matter of fact, I'd like to share a 12/8 Afro version of a rhythm changes contrafact I myself wrote. And you should see a YouTube link about now on top, which will take you to a video of a clinic I did at Berklee College of Music a few years back. So here's a list of rhythm changes contrafacts. You can download a list of this PDF from my site, jazzguitar.richiezelon.com. Again, you will find a link in the info section down below. And this is a valuable resource because simply listening and learning these contrafacts will help you grow your melodic vocabulary over this progression. Having said that, if you're truly serious about mastering rhythm changes and developing your bebop vocabulary, I'd like to invite you to check out Volume 2 of my online course, the Bebop Guitar Improv Series. I've centered half of this course around this progression and its variations. If you're interested, I've placed links in the info section down below for this and Volume 1, which in turn is centered around bird blues. Well, it's time to sign off. I'd love to hear your comments and welcome any questions. And by the way, if any of you happen to think of any more rhythm changes contrafacts that you can add to the list, please be sure to share them with us in the comment section down below. Hope you've enjoyed this lesson, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and be sure to click on the notification icon so you won't miss anything. Have fun and see you in the next video.